Hey, and welcome back to the number one podcast in the world, the Cellarcast, episode 161. Oh boy, am I glad that I waited one extra day. I didn't even intend for that. One extra day to record the podcast because just this morning, the wondrous PS5 Pro showcase debuted online, and I'm gonna get to that in a second, right before I get through the little warm-ups. I went to go see The Big Sleep and the Maltese Falcon with my dad over the weekend. There was a screening. There's a lovely little place in Palo Alto called the Stanford Theater, where they just kind of screen classic movies and stuff. They usually have themes to go along with them. Like they'll do like a whole festival of Kurosawa movies, stuff like that. This time it's noir themed. So for a couple weeks they're showing noir classics, and he was like, I want to go to this one because they're playing. It's always a double feature of The Big Sleep from 1946 and the Maltese Falcon from 1941. I wanted to go see it with him. Number one, for bonding reasons, and number two, I've actually seen the Maltese Falcon when I was a kid, and I remember really enjoying it. So I wanted to see it again, just because. Well, one, it's really cool to see it on a big screen. It's this very old theater that was built. Oh god, when was that thing built? It has like a neat story behind it. I believe the son of like Hewlett or Packard it was like a film major and decided to. It was built in the 20s, and the son of like some Hewlett Packard, one of the founders, was a film major and decided to buy this, what at the time was like this dilapidated theater, and then renovate it and, bring it up to code and stuff, and actually get it functioning as a full-on theater that plays real film, like on reel. Not real, R-E-A-L, but R-E-E-L. So it's cool. It's cheaper than a goddamn ticket to go to a regular theater. I can't believe we paid like per person for two movies less than what I paid to see a matinee of Despicable Me 4. Okay, never mind. If you haven't seen them, I would recommend either of them. I'd probably recommend Maltese Falcon over Big Sleep if you had to. Big Sleep is definitely like it's a classic. These are both Humphrey Bogart features. Also with, what's his name? It's Peter Greenstreet? Sidney Greenstreet, sorry. And Peter Lorre, that's who it is. Peter Lorre, who's in Maltese Falcon. See, I always need something kind of easy to talk about to get my brain going. Big Sleep is kind of this, like... The funny thing about old noir movies is, man, sometimes it is difficult to tell what is going on. I'm watching it and I'm thinking... Well, all right. Number one, the first thing is the sound. The audio is the biggest hurdle, because first, a lot of the characters speak in these accents. They speak in these old kind of regional accents. For one. For two, they're kind of mumbly in the way that a lot of the characters speak in a very. I'm going to that. And three, the actual audio quality, the recording quality is low because it was made in the 40s. And for four, you're in a theater, and maybe depending on where you're sitting, the acoustics might not be very conducive to making out the dialogue. So I'm listening. I'm trying to understand, but like sometimes you really just have to let the movie go. But Big Sleep is pretty good. Maltese Falcon is great. I think that one really, really holds up in the modern day. It's a pretty, I don't know, very classic, kind of pulpy style of a plot. I guess at that point that would have just been kind of regular. It's about a the titular Maltese Falcon is this priceless jewel-encrusted artifact that is encased in... It's encased in, what do they call it? Like black enamel? It's basically been hidden inside of a different shell. And everyone's trying to get this Falcon. The main character is Humphrey Bogart, who's playing a private detective who gets roped up into the whole thing. And the first, like, maybe... How long is it? An hour 40. The first, like, 10, 15 minutes are a little bit slow because it takes a minute. It takes a little while. There's a whole, like, intro storyline, practically, that kind of leads into the actual Falcon being introduced. But once that happens, specifically the exact scene where Peter Lorre's... Was it Laurie? I never know. Character enters the film. Joel Cairo, the best character in the movie. He's just every scene he's in, I'm like, this fucking guy. He's always like pulling out a gun to threaten people and then fucking falling over and getting his ass kicked, and then he comes back and he picks up his gun again, and every scene with him is so funny. One thing that kind of surprised me about both of these films is the sense of humor, actually, that's pretty consistent throughout them. Especially, like, Big Sleep is very jokey. You know, there's, like, murder and blackmail and assassinations and stuff and all that. But the characters have, like, a very consistent sense of humor. And it really, like, pulls up the script, I think. You'd call that punching it up. So at least for as far as Maltese Falcon goes, pretty much like once you hit that like 15, 20-ish minute mark, the rest of the movie really goes. And it is consistently really fun. I really love the ending stretch of the film, which mostly takes place in like one room. I love me some good negotiation scenes, and there is a great whole sequence of a bunch of characters trying to come to an agreement on something. Trying to come to an agreement about the Falcon and who's gonna do what, and you're kind of what are they trying to screw them over? Or it's really fun. I would recommend in my 2024 podcast, I would recommend the Maltese Falcon. Yes, I would. I want to get quickly into a comments from last time. We had one sort of question. I don't know. I'm milking for time. Last time from Ryan Frigier, who said, if you like Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, which is a book that I picked up. It's on my desk right now, actually. I'm looking at it right now. Book that I picked up last week. I implore you to check out Press Reset, Jason Schreier's follow-up book. My uncle got me that book as a high school graduation present right before I started my game development degree. He was trying to tell you. I'm very excited for Play Nice, his upcoming book chronicling the Blizzard scandals. Maybe it could bring back the Blizzard block. Oh, God. So if anyone hasn't been watching for 100 years, listening to the podcast for that long, the Blizzard block was a segment that I did back when the big lawsuit came out about Blizzard's mistreatment of their employees and Activision. Yeah, that extended to Activision, but a lot of it was on Blizzard. The majority of it had to do with Blizzard Entertainment. And there was so much news coming out every single day that I talked about it for no joke. I think every single episode for like 3 months. Just constant. I would go to Reddit, I'd refresh, new information. I'd go to Twitter, new information. Just on the hour, it felt like there was just new awful stories coming out of like, we didn't know how bad it could get. Just like, just abysmal. And then naturally, as the news started slowing down, as, other lawsuits went into effect, and just things that take long, the news kind of dried up. So I haven't done it. I haven't done it in a while. I doubt that. I am very curious about that, but I have a morbid fascination with Play Nice. Because I believe Schreier was one of them. He didn't break the story. Sorry. The state of California broke the story, but he definitely knew. I believe he was working on a case for. He was working on a story about it. So he probably has a bunch of insider information that I don't know if it's exclusive, but it's at least from a journalistic perspective. It'll be interesting to see all that laid out in a in a structured story rather than just getting shotgun blasted with horrible headlines every 2 hours on the internet. Would it revive the Blizzard blog? Probably not, but I would probably talk about it. Yes. And if you have a question for me, you can leave it down in the comments below. I will get to it next time. I should probably start saying that, during this, so that I usually say it at the end of the podcast, but whatever. All right, so here's the big stupid story everyone's talking about: the PS5 Pro. Holy cannoli! So this morning, the PS5 Pro was unveiled. The mid the mid life cycle upgrade to the PlayStation 5. An astonishingly weak console. Not in terms of hardware, but in terms of software. They can pump as much technology into it, but man, the meme about the PS5 having no game. The thing was, people make the joke about the PS5 having no games, right? And people get annoyed with it, but they can't even refute it because it's true. I later on, I actually went and I double checked. Let's just get into this right off the bat. Because out of curiosity, I was like, how many games does the PS5 have? Exclusive PS5 titles. So I went and I made this quick slapdash little breakdown in my in a note file based off of the Wikipedia page for PS5 exclusive games. And I broke them down into several categories just so you can really understand what the actual library looks like. So, to preempt this, I want to say, keep in mind, it's been 4 years. The PS5 has been out for 4 years. It has a total of 21 exclusives. Now, let's talk about those exclusives. So of that 21, 5 of them are VR games. Now, if you're into VR, that's fine. I would separate that, and I would kind of almost not even count. I'm putting VR into a separate category. Let's call it a mild pejorative. One of those I think is very practical, which is that the PlayStation VR is a separate purchase. So it's more of a peripheral than anything. So I think including it with the PlayStation 5's library is technically true, but also, it's a little too specific. If you're just gonna buy, if you want to go out and buy a PS5 right now, what do you have to play, right? That's kind of the purpose of breaking this down. So 5 of those are VR games. So we're already down to 16 games. All right, one of those is a tech demo. That's Astro's Playroom. Now, Astro's Playroom, calling it a tech demo, to be fair, is a little disrespectful. I've seen that game. There is a lot of effort put into it. It's neat, it's cute, but it's also a pack-in tech demo, right? It's I was going to say Wii Sports, but Wii Sports was actually a system seller. No one, you're not really buying it. It's probably fun. It's probably a fun, cute little experience, but Astro's Playroom is, It's not like really a showstopper. All right, so okay, we're down to like 15 games. Okay, so of those 15, 3 have not been released yet. That is things like Death Stranding 2, the Wolverine game from Insomniac, and the third, which is I didn't even know this was a thing, Hyperdimension Neptunia Reverse, which is a remake of Hyperdimension Neptunia. Okay, sure. So one of them is a remake that's also not out yet. Okay. 4 of these titles already have. I don't know why they're still on the exclusive page. They already have or are getting PC ports. So like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which is that still PS5 exclusive? But it's going to get a PC port. Like, you know that, right? You know it's going to get... let me bring up the actual list. I really should have the list on me. So I can see the actual names of the games. Yeah. Okay, here we go. So like Death Stranding 2... Sorry, I already talked about Death Stranding 2. That's in the not released yet. I'm getting my wires crossed. They have or are getting PC ports, right? So Last of Us Part 2 Remastered, probably getting a PC port. Yeah, so on and so forth. I'd have to... I'm not going to spend it. I didn't actually list out which games. These are just numbers. Just trust me that I counted these properly. So 4 of them have or are getting PC ports. Actually, that's a little bit of a lie. So when I say getting PC ports, I mean those... I only counted ones that were already announced. There's actually other games like Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 2, Rise of the Ronin, and what's the third? There's probably a third. Maybe Stellar Blade, that might very well be getting. I mean, especially with Spider-Man 2. I mean, the first one's already on Steam, isn't it? Probably getting PC ports, right? 5 of its 21 games are remakes/revisions. By revisions, I mean one of the PlayStation 5's exclusive titles is R-Type Final 3 Evolved. I didn't know they were still making R-Type games, the classic shmup series. But apparently R-Type Final 2 has an update called R-Type Final 3 Evolved, which is like a PS5 exclusive update. It's numbered like it's a sequel, but I checked it. It doesn't even have its own Wikipedia page. It's a segment on Final 2's Wikipedia page. So it's basically just an update with, I think, some new levels and features and stuff. So, of the 21 games that are listed as PS5 exclusives, the ones that are completely new, not VR, actually exclusive, and out, release that you can buy, there are a total of 6 games. So in order, at least alphabetical order, they are Astrobot. Okay, apparently that game's great. Cool. They made a really good 3D platformer. Nice. That seems like a good game. Destruction All-Stars. A game which received middling reviews that I doubt you've heard of. Quantum Error, a game you have definitely never heard of, which looks like some sort of Dead Space type game that has made several publications' worst game of 2023 lists. Like, I think it has a 40% on Metacritic. I grabbed the Metacritic scores for these. Rise of the Ronin. Okay, maybe not super my type of game, but hey, like a historical Japan action samurai type game. Okay, fine. Like that, I could see that being worth playing. Silent Hill, the short message. which is I think a free like 3 or 4 hour game that's like a weird tie-in to like Konami's attempt at getting a Silent Hill relaunch. Has a 53% on Metacritic. I've heard it's bad. And finally, Spider-Man 2, which is generally pretty well received. So of these games that you would actually want to play, there's like 3. Astrobot, Rise of the Ronin, and Spider-Man 2. Rise of the Ronin and Spider-Man 2 are almost assuredly going to get PC ports in the next year or two, which will leave simply Astrobot. Damn. Death Stranding 2 better be incredible. That Wolverine game better be really good. So that's the PlayStation 5's library. Those are the reasons. If you are in the market for if you're a gamer and you're like, I have not upgraded to the next gen, to the current gen, right? You still got your PS4 and you're thinking, well, I could invest in a PlayStation 5, or I could build myself a nice gaming PC, which would be a little bit more expensive, right? What would getting the PS5 offer me over just the gaming PC? Astrobot. It's got... People were joking that like the PlayStation 5 has one game. Dude, when those PC ports come out, it legitimately will have one game that's not like a VR title. I think it's fair to section off VR into its own thing, right? It's like a separate console almost. Hello, bird. Can you guys hear that wonderful bird call outside? Woof. So, now we come to today, and they have announced for the console that has one game that just came out, the PS5 Pro. So here's the list of the updates that the PS5 Pro brings. There were 3 major tenets. Why is this on the Funko Pop News Instagram? Why is that the first thing that comes up when I search this? So, straight from the horse's mouth. A 2 terabyte SSD, DualSense wireless controller, and a copy of Astro's Playroom. Whoa! The PS5 Pro is available as a diskless console, with the option to purchase the currently available disk drive for the PS5 separately. We're gonna get into that. So here are the 3 big pillars: an upgraded GPU, so bigger graphics, advanced ray tracing, so bigger reflections. You know what's funny is that like a lot of materials don't even reflect light the way that they do when in ray tracing. Like in real life, they don't even reflect light in that way. AI-driven upscaling. It uses machine learning-based technology to provide super sharp image clarity. Which kind of just from like the visuals that they showed, to me just sort of looked like they added like a little blurring on like a sub-pixel level to fill in gaps in what I guess would be like a 1,000-inch screen that you would need to even be able to tell the difference. And for all this, if you are living in the United States of America, you can purchase that for $700. $700. They have finally beaten the PS3's launch price. What the fuck? If you're living in the UK, it's £700. I read that and I was like, that looks a little off to me, right? Hang on, I'm gonna go check. I'm not an expert on the strength of the pound versus the dollar. I'm gonna go double check. I'm gonna do a quick currency conversion. That's about $900. Are you? That's like people's rent. I think and say it for what? Let's see. It's about 800 euros. What is 800 euros to USD is $881. So it's like $200 more expensive, and 119,980 Japanese yen, which wish I had like a plug-in to quickly convert that. I should have done this beforehand. It is approximately, wow, that is like not what, that was not the number that I wanted. It's a lot of money. I don't know why Google isn't helping me out right now. It's a lot of money. This is for, it's so funny because the things that people cared about were there's no disk drive and it doesn't even come with a stand. That's crazy to me. That's like a piece of plastic. That probably costs like cents to produce, to just include with the game, or sorry, with the console. This is an enormously bad deal. An enormously bad deal, just in terms of like what you're actually getting. And then if you want to talk about the hardware upgrades, the actual hardware upgrades, I mean, I'm going to be real. I was looking, they were showing, I am not unique in my observation that I could not tell the difference between the two between the side-by-sides that they were showing off. So their big thing, that they get Mark Cerny back up. Everyone likes Mark Cerny. They get him up to talk about the PS5 Pro's intention, what they wanted for it. And when he talks about it, it sounds like it makes sense because he's Mark Cerny. And then you listen to it and you're like, huh. So the main thing that they were going for was that they noticed a trend where, I guess on the PS5, there's a lot of games that have two different graphical modes. They have fidelity mode and performance mode. So toggling between the fidelity mode prioritizes higher quality graphics, and performance mode prioritizes frame rate at the expense of the graphics, and vice versa. The complaint that a lot of people have had about things like, I think they found that like 3/4 of people, they say this in the video, 3/4 of people play on performance mode, because I think the overwhelming majority of people, like, okay, when you look at the side-by-side between fidelity and performance mode, there is almost no appreciable difference. Straight up, like, the lighting, the textures, the character models, the shadows, the anti-aliasing, like, almost everything is identical. Like, you cannot tell. The only way that you can tell is if you pause the game and go up really close to your television, right? So most people opt for performance mode because fidelity mode often somehow works the console so much harder that that a lot of games run in 30 frames per second. I didn't know some people lived like that. And it looks like shit. Like it makes it's kind of ironic in that by making the graphics look so much better, the game itself in motion looks like dog shit because it's running at 30 frames. And you can tell. You can really tell. Especially with the side-by-side. So their whole deal was, we're going to make a console that is so powerful that you don't need to choose between fidelity or performance. You can have both. And they're showing, like, okay, so they show off the fidelity, right? They show off fidelity mode in, like, a Ratchet and Clank or a Last of Us versus the PS5 Pro, the all-in-one version, the depiction, right? And it's the same. It's literally the same image. It's the meme. It's corporate needs to find you to find. You're the PR guy, and corporate needs you to find the difference between these two images. They're the same image. I'm sitting here and they've told me to like, I need to find a part of the image to zoom in on to show how they're different. It's the same image. So I'm like, okay, that is not, like, this means nothing to me. Then they go to, here's a comparison between fidelity mode, or performance mode, and the PS5 Pro. Okay, well, maybe we'll see some real distinction here, because the performance mode forgoes the better looking graphics, and they show off the difference. Okay, here's the one that has to sacrifice graphical quality for frame rate, and here's the one that doesn't. And they look at, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. I'm like squinting at the camera. I'm like, oh, I guess the texture on that sign that's 100 feet away from the camera is clearer. All right. Okay. Just like the discussion of diminishing returns has been going ever since the PS4 came out, right? I think there was a jump between the PS3 to the PS4, and the Xbox 360 to the Xbone. There was a jump. If you look at it, you can tell, right? But it was not nearly as dramatic as even the PS2 to the PS3. Now you get to the PS4 to the PS5, and it is even less. People were already talking about that way back when. I actually do feel a little bit privileged in that I got to grow up and I got to have one moment where I was really wowed by the graphics of a next-gen system. And it was when I was watching a Let's Play. It's probably like the Game Grumps Let's Play in 2014 of PT. And I remember my mind getting blown by the lighting on the hardwood floors of the house in that game. And like on the walls and stuff like that. And it looked incredible to me at the time. And now I'm assuming that was just like very high quality, normal maps and stuff like that. Which is cool, it's cool that there's such a cheap method of creating something that I think looks really good. But there's also the fact that PT was basically like a hallway. It can afford to put a lot of detail into stuff. And that really blew my mind, right? I do feel privileged that I got to have a moment like that, because I've heard people talk about going from like a 16-bit to a 64-bit console. And it's just mind-boggling how much better, not even how much better, but like how oh my god, it's like 3D and it's all real time, and it's crazy, right? And that's something that, being a little 2002 baby, I did not get to experience really. But I got a little taste of it, and yeah, it was cool. To see the technology progress. And now I look at the PlayStation 5 and I'm thinking, why was this necessary? Did this have to happen? There were theories about how they were going to go towards a modular system of just like, here's the console, and then here are intermittent hardware upgrades to install. Now, I don't even know if that's even necessary at this point. Because like it almost feels like it's at a standstill. It's kind of cool, actually, because it's like there was the industry's history for its entire existence has been chasing better and better looking graphics. And now I feel like there's really nothing else to go. There's nowhere else to go that like regular, like, people like me, or maybe you, are gonna look at hyper realistic stuff and go like, well, it's about art style and all that. But for like a lot of people in the mainstreams, I sound very... Do I sound arrogant when I say that? When I say a lot of the normies, genuinely, like, hyper-realistic stuff wows them and is, like, more legitimate to them. And I think even those people are getting kind of, like, they don't really get the purpose of the upgrade at this point. I feel like it's even starting to hit them. And now we're going to have to do something really scary. We're going to have to sell a console based on games. Ooh. Oh no. I am so curious as to where the industry is going to head when you have extremely lackluster upgrades like this. Someone pointed out, and I think rightfully so, that the Pro upgrades, like the PS4 Pro, were more for tech enthusiasts, people who were big graphics snobs and all that. The problem is, like, if genuinely, if you are a graphics snob, or you know a graphics snob who needs the highest quality, highest fidelity stuff, do they appreciate it? Do they think the PS5 Pro's upgrades are actually cool? Do they even think it's worth it? I think it's very funny that in the presentation they're showing off games that came out on the PS4. It's like Last of Us 2 Remastered. A game that originally technically came out on, when I was in high school, is being used as a tech demo. Because again, like, I look at this list and it's like, Spider-Man 2. That's like the only showcase, like, graphical showcase game that they've got. Yeah, I'm so curious to see these companies squirm and try to figure out what the hell to do. You know, it's really funny because Astrobot, right, just came out, and there were some very obvious observations about how, Concord, this game that came out that took 8 years, that cost $40 in an oversaturated market that was trying to take all your money and be a forever game, with a realistic art style to appeal to the mainstreams, died in 3 weeks. And Astrobot, a game which we've discovered recently, was made by, I think, about 60 people in 3 years on a much more modest budget. And it's like one of the best reviewed games of the year. Right? And it has like a focused scope and a team that's worked together. They work well together. They've been working together for a while. And they just made a game in a reasonable amount of time. And it was good. Right? So lots of observations about that. And it really got me thinking about something that I was considering I was first exposed to it back when I never thought about it until I made my second video on dead MMOs. And it was the incredible burden of asset creation and how chasing better and better graphics might not be obvious at first, but ends up leading to much worse games or just like a worse state for the industry. So if you don't remember the deal with Hellgate London, that was the game that was basically a proto Path of Exile made by a bunch of Diablo devs. It's like a multiplayer interconnected hack and slash game where there's like instanced areas that you go out and they're like randomly generated layouts, and it was 3D behind the back, third person like action hack and slash thing. And it was just like Diablo, like looting and getting items and upgrading them and all that stuff, right? And that game had a couple hurdles. They had like kind of like what was it, Bandai, I think, like completely dropped out of the project halfway through and kind of screwed them over on the networking thing. But like one of the biggest burdens that they had to deal with was asset production. So in terms of gameplay and coding, like these guys were pros at it. They had made 2 Diablo games. They knew how to make an algorithm that would randomly generate a layout for a level that looked really good, right? That played well. And honestly, when I was playing through it before I looked into the game more, I didn't even realize that those areas were randomly generated. They felt like designed. They felt like handcrafted. Just from my initial impression. Maybe if I went back, it would be more obvious to me. But they really did, like, they really knew how to design a game. All that stuff was very easy and natural to them. But, oh my god, all of this, like, we have to make all of these different tile sets, all these different textures. We have to make sure that the lighting works properly, because this is going to be a third-person game where you can spin the camera around and it's behind the player, and everything needs to be modeled in every direction, you know, as opposed to Diablo, which was kind of zoomed out and isometric and pixel graphics. Everything's got to be modeled and textured. It's got to work properly. It's got to light properly. The shadows have to work correctly. And they were also trying to do some kind of ambitious things with their graphics engine at the time too. And oh god, all these things have to be animated. We need all of these different. There's so much shit that we need to do, that we need to make, that just slowed down production, and it resulted in just like, oh my god, like they were not. I don't think they were expecting that. Reading the interviews from the creators, I don't think they were expecting how much of a workload they had created for themselves. And I think about that. That was in like 2005 or something, you know? And I imagine, like, you look at freaking Concord and it's like I can see every pore on this fishman's face. And I'm just thinking, god damn, how many hours did this character model take? How many people did it take to make a single character before you even get into like the animations and the voice lines? And oh my god, like the cosmetics, like it's like, okay, great, you've made your base cast, your launch roster of characters. How are you going to make costumes for them? How the costumes, like, by nature have to be really similar looking, right? Because god damn it, they just have to be like things that you could just replace, like snap in and out of the model, right? Because god damn it, what if you're gonna do something, a complete reinvention of the way the character looks? Oh my god, it's gonna take so much effort. So you can see that even before they launched, I think they knew how much of a problem this was going to be. I didn't know about this. I only learned about this from a Linus Bosman video. I love Linus Bosman. He does Delayed Input, which is like a weekly show. And he highlighted this thing where, okay, so one of Concord's things was what they called it variants. It was kind of like skins, but they had gameplay changes. So there's that, like, there's like the guy, John Concord, who you might not actually know. I don't know. I think his name is Teo, but everyone's just calling him John Concord because he's like the worst, most boring character design ever. It's like him, but he's wearing a yellow shirt instead of a red one. And when you play as yellow John Concord, he has one more grenade, but like something else is a little less. And they're like, you know, it might not seem like a lot, but it's actually, you know, changes a lot of things. And you're just, first of all, who gets excited? It's a terrible idea. Like, who gets excited? No one's going to get excited about playing as yellow shirt John Concord. Second of all, wow, that feels like an economic decision. That feels like they were trying to lighten the load of making alternate costumes for characters and trying to justify it with some kind of gameplay thing, but you know that you can't sell big gameplay changes. You can't Like, it's such a bad idea. You can't. They're like, oh, how do we get? Oh, okay. Making big, like, actual good looking skins that changed up the look of a character a lot. That's way too much work to do consistently for the whole cast. So let's just make tiny little alterations. But fuck, no one's gonna want to buy that. So how do we kind of justify it? Oh, let's add gameplay changes to them. But if you let people buy, like, what if blue shirt John Concord is a whole tier above red shirt John Concord? Now it becomes pay to win, literally. So we have to make the distinction so small that it's basically negligible, and it just completely defeats itself. And, like, these are all problems that arise because the graphics are too good. It's too good. Like, you're making so much work for yourself. I know that the art style of the game was probably the result of some sort of executive saying that they had to make it look realistic or it wouldn't be exciting. But, I don't want to pin this entirely on the dev team because, I'm always willing to give the dev team the benefit of the doubt. And the executives, I tend to give the penalty of the doubt? Yeah. The downside of the doubt. Whatever. This is also something that I think is pretty obvious, to me at least, when you look at like Street Fighter 6. Okay? Like, okay, SF6, it's a great looking game, right? The RE engine has just they have so much detail in the character models. They have, like, muscle deformation, like Ryu's. You could see Ryu's bicep flex subtly when he, like, winds up for a punch. So much detail included in the character models. There's, like, little soft body things to emulate, like, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but, like, you look like Marisa, her default stance is she's got, like, her arms raised up, when you throw a jab and then her hand comes back, her, like, bicep that hangs down, it, like, jiggles a little bit from, like, the recoil of just pulling her arm back. I noticed that in training mode, and I was like, that's such a crazy, subtle touch to add to the animation, And genuinely, I think that for looking so good, it also holds back the game and the amount of content that I can put out. Part of it is, like I've said before, I think that they kind of overcommitted in their budget to, like, avatar costumes that people didn't end up caring too much about. But also it's like, oh my god, like Kimberly, right? Kimberly's, I believe, costume 3. She has, her hair is, like, a completely different style. Her typical hairdo is she has these long braids, right? But her costume 3, she has, like, a big poofy afro that has, like, a headband over it that kind of, like, makes it, like, pop out in the front and then pop out in the back, right? And it's, like, completely different hair physics and everything. Like, they made it's like a significantly different model with different physics, and they probably spent a lot of time making that look good, Terry, right? So Terry has 2 costumes in Street Fighter 6. He's not out yet, but they've showed off a bunch of his animations and stuff. And his basic costume is his classic design, where he's got the trucker hat, right? And for his victory animation, he throws his cap into the air, kind of like a classic Terry thing. Well, his alternate costume is his Garou design, where he's wearing a completely different outfit. He's not wearing a hat. He's got, like, the long hair and the beard, and he's wearing, like, a bomber jacket, right? And when you're using that costume for his victory animation, he throws his jacket into the air. So it's a completely different animation of, like, taking it off and, like, throwing it up, right? That's like a really nice level of detail that was not, for instance, in something like Street Fighter 5, or was very inconsistently in Street Fighter 5. Like, in 5, they had, I think, like, a classic one is M. Bison, right? He's got his evil dictator cap, and for his win animation, his windscreen, he takes the cap off and he runs his hands through his hair. But he has a bunch of alt costumes where he doesn't have a hat. But so when he's using them, he takes off an invisible hat before running his hands through his hair. And you can tell it's like, okay, yeah, they had a budget and they had a time limit, and there's just stuff that they couldn't make specifically to that. And I think that the level of detail and the quality of the models and the animations in 6 is, on one hand, like it's a double-edged sword, because it looks great and it genuinely feels like when something comes out in 6, it is a really, like, all the costumes, the character models, everything, they feel really well made. They feel like there was a lot of effort and like the devs really cared about making these characters look good, right? So there's kind of like a nice feeling to that, right? But it also means that, like, god damn, this shit must take forever to make and to get finalized, right? From like concepting stage all the way to final product. And that's the cost of super high fidelity, is it's not just the initial work of making the thing, it's iterating on it, and especially if you're doing one of these live service games where you're updating stuff all the time and adding new content, it means that everything has to be to a certain standard. That's the reason why a game like Dwarf Fortress or Cataclysm DDA can just afford to add a billion different mechanics and different objects and things in the world and items and all that, because they're fucking ASCII games. They're in ASCII art. The graphics are just symbols on a grid. They have as much freedom to like, okay, just find a symbol for the thing and then just code what it does. There's next to nothing in terms of animations. It's like, it's these are the super far extremes of it. And that's why I think you look at the most success, you look at like Fortnite, very, very, I wouldn't say, I guess I could say simple, but stylized art style. You don't have to have a ton of detail in a Fortnite model to get across, what they're trying to convey with a character or something. So number one, that makes it more optimized so that more people can play it. And it also means it's easier to make those assets. I don't know if that was, it's kind of funny. They sort of almost lucked into that situation because Fortnite originally was like a single player / co-op game before they made the battle royale mode. They just so happened to be perfectly set up to pump tons of cosmetics out on the weekly. And so there's this direction that the industry has been heading that is completely unsustainable. And I think we're really starting to see the upper limit of that, The fact that Concord took 8 years, and when it was made, oh my god, Overwatch was the biggest thing ever. Fortnite was the biggest thing ever. PUBG was the biggest thing ever. And now it's like, we have very much moved on from that. Things are very different, right? Fucking pandemic happened and finished. A plague came and went, and Concord was not out. Think about how crazy that is, right? Like, if you're the longest, I think the longest a game should take is like 5 years. That's the very longest. Assuming if I hear that a game takes more than 5 years to make, I assume that something went wrong. I assume that something bad happened, something cataclysmic, and they had to restart development from scratch or something like that. And it's usually not a good sign. I think there is very rarely a good reason for a game to take more than 8 years or take more than 5 years to release, be finished. I think you'd have a hard time pointing at a game that spent longer than that and came out good, you know? Not counting, of course, stuff that's just in like perpetual early access or just gets updated constantly and all that. But like, you know, I mean, Minecraft technically took like, how long when was the first like alpha for Minecraft? You know, that started as like a one-man project on like a hobby thing, and then okay, obvious exceptions and wiggle room, but generally for something like this where it's a studio making a game, more than 5 years feels like there was a problem somewhere in development or in management or in something, right? A meteor hit the offices. I think that ever since 2013, whenever that fucking Assassin's Creed game came out where the heads didn't render but the eyeballs and the teeth did, that was when I knew, when I was 11 years old, that was when I knew that the AAA industry was heading for a bubble that was going to crash. It was obvious to me then, and it's even more obvious to me now. I think that COVID kind of sidetracked that. COVID sidetracked a lot of things, made a lot of things weird, and we are now full steam ahead and back on that road. A lot of these I mean, freaking Ubisoft, there was a story about how there was like an investor, some shareholder, some minor shareholder in the company who's kind of like an activist investor from the looks of it, was trying to pressure them into going back private, which would mean like probably a bunch of bad shit for people who work at Ubisoft, probably a lot of layoffs and stuff like that. But I mean, what is this in response to? It's like Star Wars Outlaws didn't sell that great, and recent Ubisoft products didn't sell that great, and fucking Skull and Bones, the first quadruple A game, that's going to be a legendary quote. I love the quadruple A game thing. I think it's so funny. Like, these are all enormous over... This is like when you say that something is unsustainable, what it means is like you're spending way too much money on every single project and you are requiring them to be wildly successful. Which is the opposite of like the first thing that comes to mind for me is like Blumhouse, like the horror movie production studio or distributor. I think they're a distributor. They might do both. I don't know. And their whole MO is the opposite of that. They spend small amounts of money, and then every now and again they have like a really big hit, and it makes back like 500 times its budget or something like that. Something absurd because it was so cheap to make and it just popped off, you know? That's like legitimately a sustainable business practice. You look at like the vast majority of stuff they release is like, like what? Whatever. But every now and again, the reason they're able to do that is because every now and again, they put out something that does really well. Dumping the entire GDP of like Nicaragua on a game every single year, and then 3 of them flopped in a row. Fuck. That's what unsustainability means. Ubisoft is like really I guess the Assassin's Creed money might shore them up a little bit, but like that's like they made a bubble for themselves, probably because the money guys are really bad at money, and making decisions with money, which is really funny. I didn't mean for that to rhyme. I think it'll come. I think I'd be interested to see what it looks like. It'll probably come in waves, I think. I imagine that some big studio is going to have, some big publisher, I should say, is going to have some kind of massive restructuring as a result of multiple failures in a row, right? It's going to be like a Midway or something like that situation. And then that might happen to like 2 or 3 other big publishers. And then, you know, they're not all going to get together and agree on something. It's just going to be that enough of them are going to go through catastrophes around the same time that there's going to be some sort of forced restructuring of the way that they all do things if they even stick around. And then just as a result of that, common practices in the AAA industry will be changed. AA and single A and most indie projects, I imagine, will probably be unaffected. So I guess that's acceptable news for me. It's not nice when people lose their jobs because of corporate incompetence. But hey, I am the most important person in the universe, so I think I really lucked out here. I think I'm gonna be just fine. Oh yeah, speaking of me, okay, so one of the reasons this podcast I recorded it a day late is number one, divine providence, so that I could talk about the PS5 Pro. And number two, because I was playing Space Marine 2 last night, because it came out, and I started playing it, and I was like, okay, I'm only a couple hours into it. I like it a lot. It feels good. That's my first impression. My first impression of the game is that it feels good. Oh my god, hang on. Actually, you want to talk about graphical fidelity? Space Marine 2 looks amazing. That's actually one of the first things that really struck me about the game, is how good the environments look. Not just in terms of the actual graphical fidelity and the quality and all that, but just the art direction. And one of my favorite parts of the original Space Marine was just getting to walk around a big, massive Warhammer 40k environment. And in terms of spectacle, Space Marine 2, I think because the visuals are so cool, right? It's going to depend on whether or not the 40k aesthetic works for you, but I love the 40k aesthetic. The spectacle here really does genuinely add something to the game. It feels fucking big. Added to the fact that gameplay wise, it is also big, where you have these massive Tyranid swarms that are all actual in-game entities that you can shoot and stuff, and they're not just background smoke and mirrors. It is really cool. It's great to just run around and just soak in the atmosphere. It's wonderful. That's and guess what? I do not have I guess I have I don't have the most powerful computer on the market, right? I have a 70. What do I have? I am so bad at remembering the technical specs of my own computer. I always forget what exactly I have. I did recently upgrade my graphics card. I have a 7900, an AMD 7900 XTX, and a Ryzen 7 CPU. And damn, this game looks great. And I'm able to run it on Ultra. And I have gotten some frame drops, right? I've gotten some frame drops. Mostly when the game just gets fucking crazy. Sometimes there's so much shit on screen that I'm it starts dropping to 50 frames or something like that. And I'm 50, 40 frames per second. I'm you know what? I get it. I'm not going to hold that against you. It's okay. It's almost adds to the sheer awe of how many fucking bugs are on my screen. I'm enjoying it quite a bit so far. I think the combat is definitely more fleshed out than the original. I know that this game is a fair bit longer than the original. Looking to see where that goes. But the combat feels really good once you get into it. Veteran. I started the game on Veteran. A couple things I like about this. Number one, okay, there's no FOV slider, which is cringe. But before you start a save file, it takes you through the options. Like before you start a save, it asks you like, what do you want your graphic settings, your audio settings, or the subtitles and all that. I like that a lot. Also, the way that it labels its difficulties is really nice. It has four or five difficulties, and they specifically say like, okay, here's generally what the differences are between them. But veteran, which is the third difficulty, I think there's like one or two above it. Veteran is described as the intended experience of the game. And I was like, oh, I'll start on veteran. I got my ass kicked on that first level. Oh my god. Wow. Okay, veteran is not fucking around. That's a real ass video game. I had to. You can change the difficulty in between missions. Yeah, I had to bump that shit down. I'm gonna be real. Normal for me so far has been has been fine. It's not like been super difficult. Hopefully by the end of the game it'll scale up to something. I wish there was like a little bit of a middle ground at this moment in time, right? But I imagine by the end of the game, as it gets more difficult, it'll hit like a sweet spot of difficulty. Hopefully for me. Yeah, but I've been enjoying it quite a bit so far. It's just, I love walking around the environments. The gunplay feels really nice. It shares a lot of things in common with the original, but just sort of adds things to it, which is necessary for if you're going to do it longer. I think I said in my original discussion about Space Marine is that it's a game that is exactly as long as it needs to be. It's like 8 hours and then it ends. You get to that game, you get to the point where you get to the point where you're like, all right, I think like 30 more minutes or an hour, and this would start getting to be a little bit old, and the game ends right before it starts running its course. Wearing out. Yeah, so I will probably have more to say about it next week. Oh my god, I looked at the multiplayer, I looked at the PvP, and I saw the model for the Night Lords. Oh, the Night Lords look so fucking cool in this game. Oh, they look so cool, my boys. Yeah, so that's been a good old time so far. We watched 2 movies. Kat and I watched 2 movies. Recently, we went to go see Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, the sequel to the when did that first one come out, actually? 1988. Okay, 1988 comedy movie. With Tim Burton's second film. I did not realize that Pee-wee's Big Adventure was his first movie? I did not know that. Kat told me about that. It makes sense now that I think back on it, but okay. So Beetlejuice is one of Kat's favorite movies. We rewatched it recently. I'd seen it as a kid and I remember liking it a lot, but I haven't seen it in quite a while. So we watched it a week or two ago, just to kind of get a refresh on it, and that movie really holds up. That's still a fun movie. I would place that in a genre, it's a comedy. I would also say that its other genre is fun. It's just sort of a treat to see all the neat visuals and ideas and stuff that it presents. And Beetlejuice 2 is actually pretty good. Kat said that she thought it was about as good as the original, and I see where she's coming from. I don't know if I would say that exactly, just because I have one singular problem with the film, so I don't know if I'd say it's as good. But if someone were to tell me they liked it as much as the first one, that makes a lot of sense. I see it. It's a lot of the same most of the same. Who's directing? Oh yes, Tim Burton. Tim Burton as director. Almost all of the entire cast. I believe there's only 3 actors from the original who don't show up again in this. The original couple from Beetlejuice 1, the ghosts, who are played by, oh god, what's her name? Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin. Yeah. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Alec Baldwin is just taking a break from acting for a little bit. That guy, I feel like that guy needs a rest. I feel really bad for him. And the only other person who doesn't return is the guy who plays Jeffrey Jones, the guy who plays Winona Ryder's dad, because he is a pedophile. He is a super pedophile. So he's not allowed on the streets anymore, much less in the studio around Jenna Ortega. But other than that, I think just about everyone from the first movie is back, who are, like major roles. Even like the fucking, what's her name? She plays the lady who's like the real estate agent. She's back too. No. It's not her. It's the character. Sorry. The lady herself isn't back. She might have died. I don't know. She has like a little. It's actually like a really funny little bit. I like it. A little visual gag in the original is the lady who's the real estate agent who keeps getting. She's trying to get the Maitlands to sell the house, and they're always like annoyed with her and stuff. And she gets into like her car, and her little daughter is in the back seat. And they're wearing like almost the same thing. Like they're styled in exactly the same way. It's very funny. And I is it the same? I wonder if it's the same actress who played the daughter. That would be funny. But it's at the very least the same character. It's pretty much everyone back, and it's just sort of like a pretty fun screwball comedy, which there haven't been like any I feel like there's been 0 of that type of movie in the last, it feels like 10 years, at least in American cinemas. Comedies are in a very weird spot in terms of the Hollywood system, where I'm trying to even think of big studio comedies that have come out recently, and none really. They're always like action comedies or something like that. But this is just like a straight ahead comedy film. And you know what? I thought it was pretty funny. The lots of sight gags, lots of fun little dialogue bits. It has my favorite thing, which is awkward humor. There are several awkward scenes, which I love. Intentionally awkward. And genuinely, I think a really nice building upon of the characters from the original. So the premise of the sequel is that... Oh, what's her name? What's the character's... Lydia Dietz. I don't know why that escaped me. Winona Ryder's character, Lydia Dietz. She's now grown up, and she has... A lot of stuff has happened in her life. She had a husband. The husband died. She has like this new boyfriend. She has a daughter who's Jenna Ortega. And they make that make sense by having the dead husband. He was like something South American. So that's why Jenna Ortega gets to look like a Latina compared to the very white Winona Ryder. And I really liked the way that they wrote Jenna Ortega and Winona Ryder's dynamic, because one thing that I feel is a little bit underrepresented in fiction is a child who is completely, what you see a lot, which is that oftentimes people try to be the exact opposite of their parents. And I think it's actually really clever the way that they write their relationship and how Jenna Ortega's character acts and her whole attitude and everything. Because Winona Ryder's character, Lydia, is, she's like an 80s little goth girl. And she's all into spiritualism and all this, hokey pokey stuff. And Jenna Ortega is like the exact opposite. She actually kind of resents her mother. She thinks it's actually she basically thinks her mom is a fraud because Lydia's deal since the first movie, now that she's grown up, is she's used her talent for speaking to ghosts, and she's basically like Zach Baggins. She's doing like ghost adventures. There's a really funny clip where they show like her ghost hunting show, and it's her. They do like the night vision green camera thing, and it's her walking into she's like, okay, we're going to go into the kitchen, and they walk into the kitchen, and immediately like all the cabinet doors just start opening and slamming and stuff. Like the table flips over and like the window shatters and stuff is flying all over the room. And like the camera slowly turns around to look at her. And she's just standing there and she's going, okay, I'm feeling a dark presence. I think we should get out. Meanwhile, Jenna Ortega's character, Astrid, I'm sure that's some kind of reference to like the occult or something, is like super, she can't see ghosts. She does not inherit the gift. And she kind of resents her mom. You kind of get this impression that Lydia has been sort of prioritizing her career over her family, and the way that Astrid talks about her dad is way more like warm and loving, and you can tell that she had a very close relationship to him, and so she intentionally takes after him way more. Like he was all into like social causes and environmentalism and stuff, and that's like a big deal for her, and like travel. And she is a very like facts and science, and I only trust what I can see kind of thing. She also doesn't like her mom's new boyfriend, who's this guy. It's funny, like at the start of the movie, what's his name? I forget what's his character's name. Rory, yeah, Rory. At the start of the movie, you really don't know like what his deal is. He kind of seems like he's her producer, and then you kind of figure out that he's her boyfriend also, and you can't really tell like if he's just like exploiting her, or if he cares about her, or like is he like mildly like possessive, or like you really can't get a handle on him, which sort of, it feels intentional. It feels like that's sort of how he likes it. Like, he's just kind of and it feels like he's maybe got something a little more insidious going on, but I just could not. He just came off so weird. Like, what's his game? What's his game plan for this? And obviously Astrid absolutely despises him. She thinks he's a loser. The way he talks is like, there's like a scene of him trying to talk to her and be like, I just think I could be like a cool dad, like a dope guy. Just completely failing to make any kind of connection. Much like the first movie, it takes a while for Beetlejuice to show up. Is this movie 104 minutes? Seriously? Wow. That does not feel it's less than 2 hours. That's funny. Okay, if there's one knock against this film, It's that I think it feels a little bit too long and it's a little bit unfocused. And by that I mean it has like one too many plot lines going on. And to the degree where it was a little bit difficult for me to sort of keep track of what the main plot of the movie was. In the original, it's pretty simple. It's this married couple dies, a new family moves in, they really don't like the parents, and they're basically trying to scare them and haunt them and get them out of the house because they can't, because they're bound to the house, they can't leave. And so they're trying to scare them off the premises like a Scooby-Doo villain. And in the process of doing this, unleash this like weird demon ghost guy, Beetlejuice, who is like this chaotic force of nature almost type trickster. I think in the new one they call him a trickster demon, which is a pretty good way to describe him. Pretty apt, I think. Which leads to the plot happening, and Beetlejuice has his own ulterior motives and all that. So overall, pretty standard plot. Standard plot? I don't know. Straightforward plot. I won't call it standard, but pretty straightforward plot. And a lot of the appeal of that original movie, I would say, is in the fun aspect of, I don't want to use the word world building, but it's the way that all the fun concepts that are introduced. Like, you've got this whole afterlife, and it's a very unique take on what the afterlife is like, with lots of really memorable visuals and concepts, and like, oh, it works like kind of like a bureaucracy, and there's a waiting room to get into the afterlife, and they've got offices in there, and you have to go to like a desk worker, and everyone who's there is like in the form that they were in when they died. So there's like a guy with his head chopped off. There's a guy who's just like he's just been flattened because he got run over by a car and stuff like that. And of course, all on like practical Tim Burton sets and using puppetry and stop motion and all that cool stuff. It's just like a real treat. Like it's a fun movie to watch. I keep saying that because that was probably the number one emotion I felt while watching the movie. For a sequel, well, you know, a big draw of that first film was being introduced to all these concepts. And, well, you already did that, so you can't really rely on that again. So you got to have a little bit more going on plot-wise. And I would say that Beetlejuice has, like, one too many plots. The way I've been describing it, the stuff that stuck out the most to me is really the family story with Winona Ryder and Jenna Ortega and the boyfriend. And fucking Winona Ryder's mom, that character, the mom from the original movie, who is still like this crazy, I'd say crazy, but like this really high on her own supply, like modern artist type who's just totally self-obsessed. Like, she's great, and it's really fun. There's a very unique dynamic in the movie of you have 3 different generations of grandmother, mother, and daughter. And all of them interplaying, and it's really fun to see. Again, like, I really like the way the family dynamics are written in this movie, because you get to see the way that each one of these women has reacted to being raised by their mother. You know? When you see... I have to look up the actress's name. She's the mom from Home Alone. Catherine O'Hara. When you see how the way that she acts, and then you see Lydia as an adult, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then when you see kind of the way that Lydia has turned out herself, and you see how Astrid acts, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. I see that. And knowing like who the fathers are and all that. Like, that's the most interesting stuff to me in the movie, like plot-wise. And the it's kind of funny because for a Beetlejuice movie, feels like he kind of is not like he also honestly doesn't even feel like the focal point of the original too much either. He just kind of shows up and fucks around and causes problems and ends up being like the major conflict of the film. In this one, he's like, they try to give him a little bit more to do. The one superfluous plot line is Beetlejuice has like this ex-wife who's like a stapled together ghost woman who sucks people's souls out, and there's a lot of time dedicated to it in the first chunk of the movie of like her being introduced and her going around sucking out like the souls of these already dead people. So she's like absorbing them, she's like killing them for real, like essentially destroying their souls. And like fucking Willem Dafoe is in the movie. He's an actor. He's the ghost of an actor who played cops in like television roles and or TV roles. That's the same thing. I meant movie roles. He played cops like in movies, and now he's like a cop in the afterlife, and he's like doing the whole thing. And he's like really into the act and stuff because like nothing ever happens. So he's always just practicing in front of his mirror and flirting with his like assistant who's always bringing him coffees. And it's very funny. The great Willem Dafoe. I didn't even know he was in it. I love seeing Willem Dafoe. I love Willem Dafoe. Also known by the Spanish-speaking community as Guillermo del Enemigo. There's like this whole thing with the ex-wife and all that, and she matters almost nothing to the film. Like, I was thinking about it, and you can take her out, and nothing about the movie really changes. Nothing about the film really changes, which is what led to it feeling a little bit longer than it actually is, because it's like, you spend a lot of time on this, and then it's, now we're going to the actual plot, which is like the three generations coming back together in the original town, and this whole thing with Jenna Ortega and this guy that she meets. And like when that showed up, I didn't know that was going to be an important part of the movie. It just felt like, oh my god, are we getting another plot line? And it turns out no, that's actually a core part of the film. It all ties together in the end, right? But it does have a little bit of sort of extraneous fluff that I feel like maybe could have been worked out of the script. The Beetlejuice stuff that is there is fun. It's kind of funny because Michael Keaton is in so much makeup that he looks the exact same. He genuinely, he looks the exact same as he did 40 years ago. He's still got it. He's still got it. You can tell he really likes playing this role. He's having a lot of fun. And the Beetlejuicy effects. So, okay, here's the thing. One of the things that I was interested in this movie, that interested me about this movie, that Kat was kind of, she was telling me because she was excited about it, was that it was going to be mostly practical again. And I want to say 90% of the movie is practical effects. There's a little bit of CGI, you know, which is, I don't know, just normal. It's stuff like touching up backgrounds, and there's one scene with like snakes, I believe, where they're like supposed to be real live snakes, and they have to move in a sort of specific way that I was like, okay, yeah, well, those are, I see why they CGI'd that. But most of it is puppets and real sets and crazy zany lighting and stop motion stuff. There is a whole stop motion like flashback sequence that's very fun and charming. Like visually, probably on par with the original at least. And in terms of being like, okay, I hate the term legacy sequel. It just makes my skin crawl. And I have been, something I've learned is that I really dislike modern movie trailer styles, like the editing. I think the editing might stick out more to me because, you know, I am an editor. But like, because I can literally see like all the decisions that are being made and picture how they're being made in the trailer, it just kind of makes my skin crawl. I hate it. It's so cringe to me. And one of the things I really dislike about the marketing for movies like this and why it feels so cheap is that it feels like it's banking entirely off of nostalgia. Like, we're going to play the song from the first movie, but it's going to be in a piano. It's going to be like a slow piano rendition, and it's going to be in a minor key. And, you know, I remember, like, when we got the trailer for the Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, was that the second one of the new ones they were doing? I think it was Frozen Empire. I remember, you know, because Ghostbusters is a fucking screwball, wacky-ass comedy. And then they have this trailer that's, like, so self-important. Your grandfather saved New York. And I'm like, dude, like, it's a Marshmallow Man. Like, it's dumb. Like, I think it's dumb. And I just remember, like, looking at Kat and going, that looks like a really funny comedy. That was so funny. And the marketing for BJBJ, that's what we in the biz call it, gave me that same impression of we're not selling you on the movie, we're selling you on the name. That I find so repulsive of, like, you remember Beetlejuice? It's Beetlejuice. Doesn't that make doesn't that give you the goosebumps? You little 80s kid, you little consumerist slut. Aren't you excited for the thing from your childhood again? Whoa, we're presenting it as being super important because it's important to you. Not because the story is high stakes. Like, imagine if there was no original, right? And you know, these types of trailers came out. It would be like, what? This is a horrible... like, what is this? And it's funny because the movie itself, BJBJ, doesn't do that. It is actually very not nostalgia pandery. There are a couple things that I can, like, kind of nitpick, like Bob, the shrunken head guy from the first movie, is back, but there's, like, a bunch of him for some reason. He's like a minion. He's like the Minions for some reason, when there was just supposed to be one guy. I guess they pissed off a lot of African shamans. Also, yeah, really funny that's like a super marketable character who is based on, like, a racist stereotype about, like, fucking African voodoo practitioners. Like the whole shrunken head thing. There's like that, but it's like, I don't know, whatever. There was a woman in the audience who got really excited when Bob showed up. She was like, Bob! It's Bob! I guess there's some real Bob fans out there. Like the sandworm from the original comes back, and it's like, you know, I guess that's just a part of the afterlife, is the sandworms. Like, that's where you go when you step out of the house and all that. Okay, fine. I can accept that. They don't even do like really corny, like, dialogue references. Like, not that like really stuck out to me. They aren't like, here's the line that we're going to say again, and you know it because you watched that movie or the other movie. Like, it really was not rubbing it in your face, and was not relying, for the most part, didn't rely on imagery from the original, which I appreciated a lot. There's a lot of new stuff in this. There's just, like, fun new, like, okay, there's, like, a dry cleaners in the afterlife, you know? There's a detective's office, and what does that look like in the afterlife? There's, like, I really liked the Soul Train, which is like this Motown 70s disco soul. It's a reference to that. It's like a train station with all these corpses and stuff, like, dancing around. And they're all playing like Motown music. Like fun new ideas that were engaging to look at. I was never bored while watching the movie. I was a little bit confused as to where it was going, and at points it felt a little bit disorganized because, it felt like it had, that whole ex-wife plot took a little too much screen time for something that didn't end up being very important. Michael Keaton, when he shows up and does his thing, it's fun because it's like, oh, now he and Lydia, there's a point in the movie where they have to like cooperate with each other. And that's like fun. That's a new dynamic to throw in there. He is still the same character. He is still, I appreciate that, they looked at the original Beetlejuice character and they were like, this is a guy who like shows up and just like gropes women and tries to marry a 13-year-old girl. And they did not shy away from that at all in the new one. He is still like a pedophile rapist freak. And it's great. I love it. He's working an office job and he has a picture of 13-year-old Winona Ryder on his desk. Like he's still not over it. It's hilarious. Overall, genuinely pretty good movie. I appreciate that it exists. One of the few of these legacy sequels that was like, that actually felt justified and like it was worth making. It was good enough to warrant being made. I think if you liked the original, you'd probably like this one as well. I should say, so when Kat and I went to go see this, we saw like kind of a matinee. We saw like a slightly early showing of it, like a 5 p.m. showing or so. Pretty packed, all things considered, for a movie theater post-COVID. They're typically pretty empty. The only one I can think of that was more full was maybe the Mario movie, or let's see, Barbie had a lot of people. Oppenheimer had a lot of people. Despicable Me 4 had a lot of families. Most of our audience was alt girls, which Kat observed immediately. She like sniffed them out. And all right, so during the previews, we got a trailer for Joker 2, and Joaquin Phoenix showed up on screen. It wasn't immediately obvious like what movie it was, at least not to me. But the shot that Joaquin Phoenix shows up, a girl in the audience like squeaked. She went like, it's him. And that was so fascinating to me. Like that's your big crush, is like the guy, like he's supposed to look weird, and I don't understand. I do not understand straight women. Straight women are an enigma. Straight women and their tastes are an enigma to me. I don't get it at all. I just thought that was really funny. Like I heard it. I was like, oh my God, someone's got to wipe down that chair. Joaquin Phoenix showed up on screen for 5 seconds. So yeah, that was genuinely, I had a good time. I would recommend it. Beetlejuice, or BJ. And then finally, we also, we got home and Kat was like, I want to watch a shitty movie now. So we watched Radio from 2003 starring Cuba Gooding Jr. So Radio belongs to the genre of films of non-handicapped actor playing a handicapped person in an attempt to win an Oscar because they were so brave, because they went gah, gah, on screen, and they were so brave. Maybe that sounds mean, but honestly, I think this movie is more offensive than what I just did. So this movie is like not good. Radio is not a good film, and but it has some very bizarre qualities to it. So here's the basic premise. It's based off of a true story. I don't really care about the true story. I care about the movie as it is, because it's like, so it takes place in South Carolina in 1976, where Cuba Gooding Jr. plays a severely mentally handicapped young man. It's never really clear how old he's supposed to be. Maybe in his 20s? I'm not sure. But he basically just pushes a shopping cart around town in this small rural town in the 70s. He basically gets taken in by the local football coach, played by, what is this, like, embarrassing performance? Played by, dude, show me the actors. It's an actor I know. Ed Harris. Ed Harris plays the football coach, who takes him in and kind of takes pity on him and tries to, give him a life and kind of give him something to do, because he's literally just a guy who wanders around. He has a home, but his mom, she's like a single mother, and she works. They made it so the dad died. They didn't make. I was waiting to see if they would say that he walked out on them, but no, he died. So we're breaking stereotypes. The mom works at like a hospital, and she works like 16-hour shifts. And it's such a bizarre movie, because normally this is the point where I would start talking about, I would say, so here's the setup, but the but never comes, because this is a movie that is devoid of any real overarching conflict. There kind of is one, but it only shows up like twice. And otherwise, it's just a couple little mini incidents that happen throughout the movie. It is a shockingly peaceful film. Positive to the point of almost like being repulsive, for a couple reasons. So the movie gets real for like in two scenes. The first one is really early in the movie, and it's when Radio is like walking by the football practice, and he catches a ball because it goes over the fence. He catches the football and he puts it in his shopping cart, and he walks away, and he doesn't, like, they call out to him, and he just like doesn't even look back at them. He's just not even thinking about it. It's not in his world, right? And he later on they see Radio walking around, and then you cut to them in front of like a shed, like an equipment shed, right? And the coach of the football team, and I think like the basketball team as well, like just they from the athletic department, they see the guys hanging out in front of the thing, throwing the pigskin around, and they hear this weird noise coming from inside of the shed, and they go inside to find that the football players have tied Radio up and bound his arms and legs and tied him to like a fucking pipe in the shed in like the building, which is like a hate crime. It's really disturbing and fucked up. And it's probably the worst thing that happens in the movie. Nothing that bad ever happens again. And it feels like a tone setter, and then nothing of that level happens again. And this is where you get into like kind of the weird aspects of this movie. Because, I just said hate crime, right? Now, you may or may not be aware, Cuba Gooding Jr. is a black man. He is he's visibly black. And he is, as opposed to invisibly black, like Vanilla Ice. And he is playing, again, a severely mentally handicapped man, black man, in 1976 in South Carolina. And there is never a racial aspect to his adversity. It is so weird. you feel like, do I need you to drop a bunch of N-bombs? I mean, you don't have to. It would have been period accurate. But I don't need you to go super duper hard on the language. But like, it's not just that there's never any kind of racial thing. It's that, number one, everyone just immediately loves him. And number two, this is the most racially progressive town I think that exists probably to this day in South Carolina. It to the point that it almost feels calculated. Like, okay, so Ed Harris, the coach, takes Radio in and just kind of like drives him to the practices and stuff like that. And Radio kind of starts working as like an assistant and all that. And everyone just immediately loves him, despite the fact that they practically lynched him days earlier. Now they're just cool with it, and he's actually super cool with them, and everyone gets along and they're friends. It's so weird. Everyone in the town loves him because he shows up and he's Radio. And eventually football season ends. It's like basketball season, and some of the guys on the basketball team, there's a scene where one of the only incidents in the film is a scene where 3 of the guys on the basketball team trick Radio into going into the girls' locker room, the shower rooms, while they're showering, and just horribly embarrassing, and everyone's screaming and freaking out, and they like strategically place one black guy into the trio of like basketball players, so that it's not a race thing. Because I feel like it feels, there's always like just enough black people to justify that it's not a race thing. Like if it was 3 white guys, you'd be like, oh, it's because they're racist, but there's one black guy there. They have a black friend. Don't worry. They have a black friend there. The principal of the school is black. There's like black extras. There's one other time where the movie gets real. And it's the moment where it's like after Christmas. It's on like Christmas Day. And Radio got a bunch of presents, and he's going around the poor part of town handing them out. He's putting them on people's doorsteps. And a cop pulls up and basically assumes that Radio has stolen these items and is like redistributing them. Excuse me. And so he Radio, who has a ton of, he can barely speak, right? Is not able to like properly hold a conversation with the cop. And so the cop gets out of the car and like grabs Radio and slams him against the car and handcuffs him and takes him back to the station. And you get like him doing paperwork later in the station. These 2 other cops come back, and he's like, hey, I just got a guy. I don't know his name though. He wouldn't tell me his name. And they throw in this line of dialogue where the other cops go, wow, it's his first day and he already caught a John Doe. They already, he already got, so how funny. And then they, to make it clear that the only reason that this cop persecuted Radio and was so brutal with him was because he didn't know Radio. If he knew Radio, everyone loves Radio. And they go into the cell, and like it's a little disturbing because Radio's in there and he's like scared and crying, and they're like, what the hell, it's Radio. And then they cut to like the 2 cops and Radio watching basketball and like eating donuts while the mean new cop is like doing paperwork to like for his release form. And the coach comes in, Ed Harris comes back in, and he looks at that cop and he's like, this guy didn't even know Radio. The fuck does he know? It's so weird, right? Like watching this. Like I remember when we watched Princess and the Frog, and I thought it was kind of awkward how in the first bit of that movie, they almost go out of their way to ignore the fact that the adversity that Tiana is getting is very clearly because she's black. Like the fact that she can't get a loan despite not having like any debts. The fact like there are clearly things that you're like, oh, this is because she's black in Louisiana in like the 30s or something. But they just like kind of tiptoe around it. In that movie, I thought it was it was a little distracting to me. But at least it's only in like maybe the first 20 minutes. In radio, it is constant. You are constantly thinking about how like there isn't like a single person who has a problem with this. There isn't, dude, like these people, most of the adults in this film, most of the adult characters were born before the Civil Rights Act. They were born when like the grandfather clause existed. This is in South Carolina. That's not even a great place to be black today. But everyone's just cool with it. It's just the most racially progressive. It's so weird how it never comes up. I get not, I was about to say, I get maybe not making the racial aspect a huge focus of the movie, but the complete ignoring is so weird. It is so off-putting. Everyone just loves radio immediately. No one has a problem with him. Everyone, like, he rides the bus and he welcomes people on the bus and they're like, yo, radio, good morning. It's what? No one what? And this is before even getting into the whole, dude, Cuba Gooding Jr., watching him in this movie is so embarrassing. It is so hard to watch him act out the part of this like mentally handicapped guy who really existed. It's based on a true. There was like a James Radio Kennedy. He got the nickname Radio because he loves listening to the radio, right? Oh god, well, dude, before we even get into that, like when I talk about the lack of conflict, they set up this thing where the coach's daughter is like, she's going to college soon, and like, oh, he's spending more time with radio than with her, and is that no, it's never a real problem. It's never a problem. She completely understands because it's radio, babe. Everyone loves radio. She's like, for radio, do whatever. Fuck me, dad. Don't even come to my wedding. Don't even don't even bother coming to my wedding. Not because I don't like you, but if radio comes up, I get it, you know? So, what even happens in the movie? What happens is Cuba Gooding Jr. goes, radio for like an hour and a half, and it's so hard to watch. Every time your suspension of disbelief starts creeping in, at least for me, I was just ripped back into reality with like, oh, he practiced that. He practiced like bending over and having like a weird posture and like mumbling and not making eye contact with people and practically drooling on screen. Like at one point, like it, and dude, it's so hard to watch. It's genuinely like, dude, I'm getting so much secondhand embarrassment from watching this. At one point, there's like a scene, just one of his scenes where he's just doing his like, and I turned to Kat and I said, do you think he went method for this? Oh my, can you imagine just the mental image of Cuba Gooding Jr. going home to his family and like making his wife wipe his ass or something like that? I mean, that's genuinely, like, I was reading through reviews and there's a lot of things. There's some like random review on IMDb that pointed something out that is so true, which is when someone is as disabled as him, like you need a lot of help doing shit, and I think one of the movie's biggest problems, and one of the ways in which it's so slimy and manipulative feeling, is that it doesn't really ever go into the realities of having a disability. Radio, it's all in the most surface level things of like radio, like he can barely speak, right? He can't really communicate with people. It never gets into things like, well, like how does he make food? How does he like how does some people they literally like they can't wipe their own ass when they go to the bathroom? Like these are real things that people with disabilities have to deal with sometimes. You know, how do they dress them? Like, where did they get new clothes from? His mom is always working, and it's like there's all of these real realities to his situation that the movie doesn't bother going into, because ultimately, I think what I'm about to say can be summed up in the worst line of dialogue in the entire film, which is when the coach is giving an inspiring speech at the end about how much radio means to all of them. And he goes, "We're not teaching radio. Radio's teaching us." And it's oh my God, fucking trailer line. And it really encapsulates the fact that movies like this are not made to really represent disabled people, the struggles they go through, the realities of their lives, their humanity, their, you know, the respect that they deserve. Really, these movies are made for non-disabled, able-bodied people to feel good about themselves. The movie is about the goal, the aim of the film. I don't know if the filmmakers intended this, but there was some kind of inherent bias. The goal of the film really, and what it accomplishes, is for someone like me who does not have a mental disability, who does not have a physical disability, to feel really good because I am seeing other non-disabled people who are like a representation of me, treat a disabled guy with love and kindness and affection. And of course that happens in real life, but like it's kind of like, you know, when you hear gay porn that's made for straight people, or lesbian porn that's made for straight people, right? It's kind of like that. The purpose of this is to make someone, it's not for the people it might be claiming to represent. It's for the satisfaction and the gratification for you to put yourself in the shoes of Ed Harris and go, yeah, I would be that good. I'd be that good to this disabled guy. But in reality, I'm going to be real. I ride the fucking bus like every week. And sometimes there's a guy who's tweaking the fuck out on the bus, and I'm like, I'm not like thinking awful thoughts about him, but I'm like, okay, I hope nothing happens. Like, that's like, and that's not entirely fair to them, right? I know that. But also, like, that's a reality I have to deal with. That's a reality that they have to deal with, that like, oh yeah, it probably does kind of suck that sometimes when you're acting weird in public, people are going to give you weird looks. I don't give people weird looks. I try not to make myself sound... I hate the disabled. But like, no, like if you've ridden the bus or public transit, or you've had to deal with a really mentally handicapped person, yeah, sometimes it's not always like a heartwarming, clean, pleasant interaction. Sometimes it's a little weird, or it makes you feel a little bit unsafe because you're not sure exactly what's going on. That's a real thing that these people have to deal with. But this movie never bothers to confront that. It's not interested in talking about that. It's interested in turning radio into like a mascot, into like this like puppy dog who is completely, whose experience outside of the most surface level struggles has been manicured and kind of sandblasted off so that it's easily digestible for an audience of able-bodied people. And I find it kind of disgusting. I find this movie kind of gross. They can't even acknowledge the racial tensions, which I know absolutely existed at the time. Are you fucking kidding me? Are you kidding me? Movies, these sorts of movies, they're like a subgenre. There's like Riding the Bus with My Sister. There's like I Am Sam. They don't get made very much anymore. And I think that's a good thing, because they never star actual disabled people who I think you definitely could get to play roles like this. For the most part, depending on what the specific disability is, you know? I don't like it. It makes me feel gross to think about it. About like what it accomplishes, right? I think it's a little repugnant, actually. I often, now mind you, again, I am not disabled. I don't know anyone. I don't have anyone in my life really who has a mental disability like this. I've actually worked with certain people through like service projects and stuff who do. So, you know, I have some experience with it. I don't know what they think about films like this. From my perspective, I would be curious to know if you are like that, or if you know someone like that. Like genuinely, like what do you think of films like fucking Radio? I think it's lame and a little bit insulting, but it's not entirely my place to speak on it. So I'd be curious to know, you know. We don't get a lot of actual representation of those types of people. I think it's funny, you know, because it's like I was gonna make an analogy. I don't know if it entirely holds up, but like people, you know, movies that might be noteworthy for their representation, or you know, it's like there's a gay character and they're played by someone who's straight. But I mean, you know, I think I don't know, man. It feels different. Something about that feels different. If you were to do like, oh God, what was that fucking, I remember 10 years ago, there was some college theater program that put on a play about Martin Luther King Jr.'s life, and they cast MLK as a white guy, which is hilarious. He was just the best. Hey, it was just a meritocracy, man. He was just the best actor for the role, you know. It's kind of a play it by ear thing, where of like what sort of seems right and what seems weird. I think in the case of like the racial one, it's probably weird to have the most famous black civil rights activist be played by a white person. To me, having disabled people be played by, like, to make a movie about a disabled person and have them be played by a non-disabled person or someone who doesn't have even like a form of that disability feels a little weird. It gives me a bad vibe. The last one I remember doing that was Music, which was that movie directed by Sia. I think the funniest thing that ever came out of that was this exchange on Twitter. So first of all, that movie had like a bunch of shit that I heard was wrong. Like that was like some woman taking care of a little girl who was like autistic, and it had a bunch of shit like really bad representation of what to do if like an autistic person is having like a fit or something. Bad in the sense that it isn't just, it was like, oh, you need to like pin them down and restrain them, and which is like apparently the exact opposite of what you should be doing in a case like that. And it's also framed as like, it isn't just like, oh, the character doesn't know what to do. It's like specifically something that the movie says, like a character is like, you need to pin her down and like constrain all of her limbs. That'll really calm her down. It had shit like that. She worked with Autism Speaks, which is like the worst autism fucking awareness organization. They're the people who treat it like it's this illness, like this awful disease that needs to be eradicated, which is not really how modern autism advocates, I suppose is would be the word, preferred to look at it. And then the actual kid herself was played by a non-autistic actress. And I remember this wonderful exchange on Twitter where someone asked Sia, hey, why there are so many actors with autism that you could have cast in this role? Why didn't you go with any of them? Why didn't you look specifically for actors with autism? And Sia's response, I believe, was maybe they just weren't very good actors. Hilarious response. Just like, did you? Okay, all right. Maybe they weren't very good actors. Just so blunt. Did she give a fuck? not even like a good. I don't know. It's not even like a good. None of them were. Whatever. Yeah, Radio is a bad movie. You don't need to watch it unless you're morbidly curious about this god-awful subgenre of inspiration porn, honestly. Right? Like, dude, the biggest moment in the film is when Radio's mom dies. She dies of a heart attack. It happens off camera. You never see her again. There's like a scene where he gets mad. You don't even see him get mad. You don't even see him like throw a fit, because maybe that would be too... Seeing him get really angry might actually be a little bit too unappealing for our Mickey Mouse of Asperger's syndrome. The Mickey Mouse of Asperger's. That was off the dome, baby. So we can only show him in the aftermath when he's sad and you get to feel bad for him, not when he's tearing the room up and it might be a little intimidating or scary. No, we can only show him when he's happy or sad. When he's happy, so you can feel good for him. When he's sad, so you can sympathize with him. Ugh. I hate this movie. The more I talk about it, the more I hate it. Every decision feels so gross and calculated. Anyway, fuck Radio. Terrible movie. That's all I've got. I'm hungry. I'm gonna eat some carnitas. Some carnita with salsa or something. I don't know. I got it in the fridge. If you've been listening this far, thank you for listening to me ramble. If you have a question, feel free to leave it down in the comments below, but please phrase it in the form of a question, because I'm not just going to read your thoughts out loud. I have been Tygan, looking forward to playing more Space Marine 2, trying to finish this video. Be on the lookout sometime. I don't know. Probably before the end of the month, at least. Do I have anything else? Patreon. I have a coffee. I have other channels. Yeah. Bye.